What's up, my family? Listen, first-time listener, or you've been here the whole damn time. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, giddy up, let's go, no notes.
That's my baby. That's my baby.
We're going at it at 110%.
I just want 5 minutes of happiness, please. Just give me 5 minutes.
And they scored! They did it!
Slap.
What the hell was that?
Oh, yeah!
What the f*** are you talking about?
Hey there, hi there, hello there. You're with us once again for Bowen On The Birds every Thursday here on A2D. I'm as amazed as you are. They still haven't pulled the plug on this. I guess, they don't have anything better to put in this spot. So here I am. We have an interesting show today. We have Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post, who covers the Commanders. And then we have Bo Wulf, our longtime Eagles reporter, who recently went from The Athletic to a new venture, at least in our market. And I want to talk to him about that move and about the team. He's been around practice this week, which I have not been. So he knows good stuff, I'm sure. Anyway, let's bring Nicki up here and see what she has to say. Howdy, howdy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Just great. So you're there in the wilds of Virginia, I guess. I drove to that place one time when Donovan McNabb had a press conference there right after the trade, and I thought I was going to end up in the Shenandoah Valley. I swear to God, you're nowhere near Washington.
No, it's like a good 45 minutes to an hour away from DC. Yeah. And from the stadium, it's even farther because the stadium's in Maryland. So
yeah, I've never seen anything like that. It's quite a thing. But you're there, and the Eagles are playing the Commanders this weekend. Mm-hmm. They played the last time the Commanders came here. The Eagles were 8-0 and heavily favored to win, and the Commanders just took it right away from them. 4 Eagles turnovers. I think people here grumpily remember Dallas Goedert's face mask being pulled and him fumbling. Mm-hmm. And then a really weird play where Quez Watkins caught like a 50-yard pass and then fumbled. And then an even weirder play where Brandon Graham sort of tripped over Taylor Heineke when Heineke sat down and was called for roughing, and the game was over. So it was a strange game, but, teams don't go undefeated in the NFL. I've been known to understand. And, that was the kind of game that you would run into if you're a good team that's going to stub its toe. So This time, a lot has changed. Ownership, quarterback, many, many, many things. Commanders are coming off a really bad outing, but before that, they were doing real well. Tell us what your sense of the team is right now.
I mean, the first couple games of the season, they're using Sam Howell, who got the last start last season, impressed enough that the team was, all right, let's see what this kid has. Yeah. And there's a lot on his plate. There's, like you said, new ownership. Everybody kind of feels like they're in, a glorified tryout this year, trying to prove that they can keep their job and will stick around. New offense, new play caller with Eric Bieniemy. So a lot of moving parts, and it kind of mostly rests on, a now 23-year-old and Sam Howell, but he's handled it pretty well. The first 2 games, they've started slow. And week 1 against the Cardinals, the defense really sparked a turnaround in the second half, and they came from behind to win late. Mm-hmm. And then in Denver, they got off to another slow start. But they picked it up in the second half and got it rolling and cruised to a win. And then last weekend against the Bills, it was just a disaster from the start, and it kind of snowballed. It was, 9 sacks on Sam Howell. He threw 4 picks. Just blame is shared all around. He's young. He's, got to get the ball out sooner, but the protection has to be better. The routes need to be better. Just all around, not a great showing. So, the thinking is that, to rid the awful taste in their mouths, that they'll come to Philly pretty fired up, but they face a pretty formidable opponent, especially after seeing what they did on Monday Night Football. So could be an interesting game.
Yeah,
Always
it's an
is.
opponent that hasn't really hitting on all cylinders yet. I mean, it's an
Mhm.
incredibly
Yep.
talented opponent, I think, but
Mhm.
one that just, people here are not happy. They're never happy, but people here are waiting to see them really put it together and play. That game Monday night could have been a lot more one-sided than it was. They were 1
Yep.
for 5 in the red zone. They really didn't capitalize on things. The passing offense still hasn't really hit its stride.
Mhm.
But a lot of other things are going well. So,
Mhm.
it's not that big a deal, I don't think. If you're 3-0, you're all right. And nobody super important is down for the season or anything like that. And that's what's,
Right.
that's of great import, I think. So Sam Howell, 5th round pick from your alma
Mhm.
mater,
Yep.
UNC Chapel Hill. And there aren't a lot of 5th round picks who turn into franchise quarterbacks.
Mhm.
We all know it happens once in a while, Tom Brady 6th round and that sort of
Mhm.
thing. But, what do you make of Sam? Was it him trying to do too much last week? Or is that kind of an example of, who he might be?
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely part of it. He admitted as much, trying to make the big play instead of the smart play and throwing it away. I think part of it too is holding on to the ball too long.
Mhm.
He has a tendency, and the Bills players notice this and pounced on it, that he can, as he's going through his progressions, he can hang on the first read a little bit too long and try to force something there and not move on
Yeah.
quickly enough.
As
Um,
young quarterbacks often do.
yeah, and that's it. And this is every system is tough. The transition is tough. He didn't really play it under center. He wasn't in a huddle, so he's transitioning to footwork. Just it's like a whole new game in a lot of respects. And the play calls and the West Coast system are pretty
Yeah.
wordy. So it's a lot he's transitioning to. So yeah, I think a lot of it is a product of his youth and inexperience. I think he still shows a lot of things that they like and feel confident in. The first being his arm. That was one thing they felt they were kind of missing. And I mean, this is no disrespect to Taylor Heineke, but that's just something that Sam Howell has. He's gifted with that, and he's accurate and can throw the ball long, deep. It's a good trait to have. And I think also just his poise, when things go poorly, he's not hanging his head. This last game, it snowballed for the team as a whole, but individually, it doesn't seem to, rattle his confidence in the moment, which
Yeah.
I think is a big thing for a young quarterback, especially when things do go wrong. Um,
Absolutely.
so they like these things, but the team has to often remind itself that he is young. He literally just turned 23, and last week was his 4th start and then a 4th game in the NFL.
Yeah.
So it's gonna take some time.
Absolutely. I think that's very reasonable. Yes. The
Mhm.
sacks seem to be kind of him.
It's a problem.
The O-line isn't that bad, right? I mean, it's mostly him holding the ball.
It's a mix of both. This last week, and I think a lot of it was on Sam, but there have been protection issues. There were concerns early in training camp. They don't the line here versus Philly. I feel like with most teams, any line compared to Philly is incomparable. But there's been protection issues. But
Yeah.
this is a new line too. They completely redid the interior. Nick
Yeah.
Gates is new, came from the Giants. Sadiq Charles has been with the team for a bit, but he's starting this year. Sam Cosmi moved inside from tackle. Andrew Wiley is new. I mean, Charles Leno, their left tackle, is the lone holdover. So
Right.
this is a new group that's learning to play together in a new system with a new play caller, a new quarterback, the whole nine. So that too is going to take some time. But there were concerns about not just overall talent but depth too, and it's.
Yeah.
They've have improved since training camp. So,
Okay.
hopefully they continue in that direction.
I recall last year that the win that the Commanders had over the Eagles, the Commanders' run game was really a key to that.
Yeah.
That might be tougher this year. I think you wrote about that today a little bit because the Eagles suddenly they've gone from a team that could not stop the run and lost a Super Bowl for that reason in the second half, pretty much, to a team that's really, really hard to run on just by having Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis up front, it would seem.
Right.
how do you think it's a different coordinator, different quarterback? Do you think they're as dependent on the run as they were last season?
I don't, but I also think they should be a little bit more dependent on it, especially with a
Okay.
younger quarterback, because they
Yeah.
do have some talented backs. And over these last couple of weeks, it does seem like Brian Robinson Jr., their lead back, has really come on and kind of
Yeah.
found his rhythm. He had a couple solid runs early, and then the game got away from him so much that they had to air it out. And for some reason, they aired it out quite a bit in the first half too.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people would like to see them run the ball more. But that's this is a pass first scheme. That's what it is. It's what they ran in Kansas City. They don't have Mahomes and Travis Kelce,
Right.
but that's what the scheme is. So, I think I'm not the one making these decisions. So
Sure.
but it
course.
would be nice to see them have maybe a little bit more emphasis on that going in, but it will be tough. And I honestly think like the run game could be the deciding factor in this game, just because with
Yeah.
what the Eagles line and what DeAndre Swift is doing. I mean, that has kind of been a weakness for Washington's defense in stopping the run.
Okay. And that's weird to me, because that defensive front
No.
is very imposing for
Very much
Washington. I
so.
think it compares with the Eagles,
Yeah.
but they did
Yeah.
not. The run last week, they didn't stop it. Why can't
It's been an issue for them, and I think a lot of it is just attention to detail.
Yeah.
Being rush lane disciplined, because a lot of times it's come from these mobile quarterbacks, and Jalen Hurts, we know, will give them a fit there. So I think it's imperative that they really focus on that, or the same thing's going to happen and much worse. With a
Yeah.
back like Swift and a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, that could be a real problem. So they are imposing up front. They have a deep secondary, but that's one area where they need to work on a bit.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about Carson Wentz, even though he's long gone. One of the most fascinating stories that I've ever covered. It went on a lot longer here, obviously, and had a lot more twists and turns than it did there. But you were around him some, and I'm just really interested. He's nowhere. He's playing for nobody this year. What do you make of that guy? What is it with him?
Yeah, I mean, he was always very pleasant to deal with. I actually enjoyed all my interactions with him. He's very nice to me, very respectful. Like it was nothing against him personally. I think in games, it seemed to me, this is my, view from afar, is, he just he lost that mobility that he had before all the injuries. So when things fell apart, he couldn't escape pressure, and it just kind of snowballed a lot. I think it affected his accuracy. I think it affected him mentally, his confidence as all this happened.
Yeah, I was going to say some of it might be up here,
Yeah, I think, I think he was, and he said as much, that too often he is always looking for that home run play instead of just taking the check down or throwing it away. And you can't do that, like there are going to be moments where you just got to take the smaller play. And I got the
I
sense
think
that
for
he couldn't
someone
move
with
off
his
that.
arm talent, it's really weird that nobody wants him to be a backup. And I think it has to do with coachability and with his
Yes, I would
mental
agree.
outlook on things. And that's so frustrating to me, because he's not a jerk to deal with.
No,
You would think this coachability thing it developed during his career. It wasn't something people talked about initially.
right.
I don't know what the heck happened there, but surely he's got to see he's sitting at home.
Right.
If I were him, but I've said this before, if I were him, I would have, done everything I could to get this out of people's minds and out of their,
Right.
but he
He
doesn't.
said all the right things publicly. He said, I got to do this. I got to do that.
It never happened.
But it didn't translate in the games. So
Yeah,
it
he
is sad,
used to
because I
have
remember
this-
watching him in his prime, and I'm like,
yeah.
holy smokes, like this guy is ridiculous. Like even just in war months, you're like, holy good Lord. And then completely.
Well, I remember a game down there at FedEx, that the really good year, the 2017 year, where there was a play where he used to do this a lot. The first rusher came in and he sort of stiff armed him and spun away from him and reset and threw deep. You just don't. He can't do that anymore. It's like you were saying. I don't know why. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, after you get hurt a few times, maybe you realize that everything that can happen when you do that, I don't know, but it's just it's one of the most puzzling things I've ever covered in my life. It really is. I was all in on the guy, and every year it just got a little bumpier, and then suddenly he was gone.
No, it is. It's very odd. Nice guy. He was very pleasant to us, but it wasn't working.
Yeah, I also felt that sometimes religion, obviously that a lot of people in football are religious, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it can become a barrier if it's something that you, or if you only are accessible to a certain group of people on the team, know.
Right.
But anyway, enough about him. He's gone from both cities. We do have to do a commercial here. Before you run off to the locker room, we'd like to talk to you a little more about Josh Harris and stuff like that on the other side.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years, and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom-reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back. I'm with Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post, and we're talking about Commanders Eagles this weekend. I brought up Josh Harris. First of all, I want to say you guys at the Post did an amazing job with everything involving Daniel Snyder. I can't imagine trying to cover the normal football stuff and all the falderall that went on around him, the cheerleaders and all the federal probes and things that it must have been just an incredible stomach twisting few years for you since you arrived on the scene.
Yeah, because like in Denver, I dealt with some ownership stuff, and I feel like Denver is kind of underrated in the sense that people don't realize how competitive of a market and how much fan interest and how much work there is that actually goes into being a beat writer there. It's not a typical smaller market by any means.
Well, the Broncos are the team there, much more than the other.
Yeah. At least, and maybe Prime has taken over there for a little bit, but typically, yes, it's the Broncos. But so, I think it prepared me well. But there's nothing like this beat here. I mean, it's one day you're covering football, the next day the DEA. There, multiple federal investigations. You never think you'll be covering, Congress or drug raids or, any of these things that challenges you as a reporter. You certainly have no hope of having a life, but that's okay. Like this is what you sign up for, and it's, I learned a lot doing it. But it was a lot, and even still, since the sale process, that's a lot too. But I think it's all positive in the direction that the franchise is headed right now.
Absolutely. And have you gotten much time with Josh Harris? Is he accessible to you guys?
Yeah, I think as accessible as owners typically are, especially in the early going as he's getting to know us in media, as he's, making the rounds with fans and getting out in the community more. And, he's really made a concerted effort. He's at every single game. On the field. Sometimes he comes down into the stands that he did in preseason for a bit. He would come down into the stands and watch. He's been very hands-on. I would imagine that at some point that kind of slows, and let the focus, and it has to a degree, just making the focus the team and football. I mean, I never once talked to Dan Snyder. And a lot of the legwork on the investigations, everything that happened was done by, my colleagues, Liz Clark and Will Hobson and Mike Mackey and all those. So it's been a long time coming. As recently as a year ago, I don't think anybody thought this would happen, that he would ever sell. And it's kind of a shock when he announced he would explore the possibility.
It was kind of hard to believe, wasn't it? I mean, a lot of people down there remained skeptical until it actually happened.
Is this a spoof? Is this real? Like, I don't, but yeah, it was wild.
So, Josh Harris around here is not beloved. I mean, he's a Sixers owner. The Sixers haven't gotten it done. I think if they had won a championship, certainly people would look at him very differently. Mm-hmm. But, he's got the hockey team. He's got the Sixers. Now he has the Commanders. Obviously, in relation to Daniel Snyder, he's wonderful. But it's yet to be seen how effective an owner he is, I guess, in terms of really, what does he want to do with all these different franchises, and what is his ultimate level of involvement going to be with each of them?
Right.
I guess getting a stadium built there would be a heck of a thing for him to do, right? Is that?
Yeah, that's definitely on the to-do list. He's got a tall task. I mean, this is a franchise that has been through a lot, its fan base. A lot of things to fix. He's got a lot on his plate with this one alone, not to mention all the others, but, building the new arena in Philly and everything that goes into that. So it's a lot. And there are a few owners that have multiple pro sports franchises. I think of Kroenke being, he's the first one that comes to mind.
And he's done well with that,
and it's definitely doable. He's had a heck of a couple of years. I think the best thing for Josh Harris right now is simply the fact that he's not Daniel Snyder. There is an extensive honeymoon that comes with that. I think perhaps this loss to Buffalo, the blowout loss, might start to turn to where the focus really is on, okay, how are you going to fix this?
What's going to get better here?
Exactly.
The cameras always show Magic Johnson as if he were like the owner, but he's sort of. I mean, what's the deal there? He's
a limited partner. Is he? Yeah, he's a limited partner. He's been out to a few. I think he's been out to the 2 home games. So he is involved, not nearly as much as Josh, obviously, and Mitch Rales is the top LP. He has significant input. Mark Ein is also involved, but those are the top 4 that are heavily involved. So he's around, but Josh Harris is still the controlling owner. He has final say, so it's his team.
Indeed. Now I have to ask you a very important question about this transition. It won't be important to any of our viewers or listeners, but as someone who came to that press box many, many times, it's important to me, even though I'll probably never be there again. The food.
I knew you were going
any better.
It is actually.
Darn it.
We might have mentioned this to Josh Harris. What do you think you could do to improve that? And
it was the worst in the league. Yeah, it was as bad as
I would put it second when the Oakland Coliseum was still around. I would.
Oh, okay. I haven't been there in many years.
I mean, when the old stadium was there, it was like ugh.
Yeah.
But it was pretty bad.
It has little things like that. Little things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, writers and broadcasters aren't going to be effusive about the team because you gave them a better meal, but just subconsciously, I think it affects the way you look at things. And for fans, the stadium affects how they look at things, how they feel. What kind of experience they've had at that game. And it's just got to be a fascinating thing to cover right now. I mean, I know people who grew up as fans of that team who had kind of just gotten away from it, which is very unusual in the NFL. Usually if you're a fan of an NFL team, it's tattooed on your body. I know people that just stopped following the team because of Daniel Snyder, and now it's all coming back, and it's got to be really exciting and energizing down there, I guess.
It is. It's nice to have more positive fan interest. You're not always writing about disasters. I think people have this, belief that we look for negative news. No, we don't like writing about negative news. It does not help our business at all. Like that's a misnomer completely.
Yeah.
So that is nice. Fans were back at training camp. They sold out their 2 home games. The question still is, will it continue? And can they improve the football product so it does continue? I think winning, as we know, ultimately trumps all, so the improvements to the stadium that they've made, there's only so much you can do to that massive monstrosity, and they know it. They have to make some improvements, and they put in $40 million in the offseason. So, they're trying to improve things, and they know what the tall task is ahead. But it is tall. It's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, it really is. But it's so overdue, and I think everyone's glad to see it. I think it's better for everybody if the teams in the division are all run by responsible, decent people and are competitive. I know some fans don't feel that way. They want all the other teams in the division to be terrible all the time. But I don't think that's how you get. I think champions are built. Like, one of the reasons the Eagles didn't win that Super Bowl against the Chiefs is that the Eagles had a very easy schedule last year, and they didn't face an offense that could do to them what the Chiefs did. Right. This year, they're playing everybody. They got the 49ers, they've got Dallas, they've got Kansas City. They'll know by the time they get to the playoffs and that's how you win, in my view, in any sport.
I agree with you, and I think it's so much more fun when the NFC East is one of the toughest divisions in football, as opposed to being the laughing stock like it was just a few years ago. So I just think the more interest, the better.
Very, very true. So one more thing, and I'll let you go. I know you've got the locker room period coming up here. The Commander's name, I saw you tweeted something about that right before we went on the air. Do you think they're going to stick with that or go with something else?
Yeah, hard to say. I mean, they've said outright they're not going to go back to the old name, the Redskins name, but they haven't ruled out, possibly changing the name in the future. I just don't think that's on their priority list right now, and they have a long to-do list. I ultimately think if they start winning with this name, then it becomes less of an issue. I mean, you think about the teams and some of their names are they're awful names, but if they win and they start to build a history as a winning team with that name, great. People will love it. You're never going to please everybody.
Right.
So,
like the Cleveland Browns are named after a guy.
Right. There's not, there's always going to be somebody griping about the name. So maybe they change it, but that's not on their, immediate to-do list.
Well, I think it'll be a very interesting game Sunday. It's one of the very few 1:00 starts the Eagles have this season. I think all the scribes will be really interested in that, because it's been deadline city for them, with a Thursday night game and a Monday night game. And you guys can get home before midnight. That'll be nice.
There's the silver lining for me. All right.
That's a big difference in covering in the East and being out West in any sport. I think is when I covered hockey, the people out West were like so envious. You mean you drive to games? Because out West, nobody drives to anything.
You can't drive to anything out West. But Philly, New York, Pittsburgh, even.
Well, it's been wonderful having you here. I'll let you go talk to those fellas in the locker room. And, I hope everything goes well for you. And I really appreciate you doing this, Nicki. Take care.
Of course. Thanks for having me. See you, Les.
So we're coming up on another commercial here. And so I hope on the other side of it, we'll have Bo Wulf to talk to and to find out all the good stuff that's going on with the Eagles.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years, and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back for the second half of Bowen on the Birds. And we have a very esteemed guest coming in, Bo Wulf. Let's welcome him to the other side of the panel there. There we go. Yes, that's him. That's Bo. I'd recognize him anywhere.
How we doing? Bowen.
How are you, Bo?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. So you were with The Athletic for quite a while, and you've made a sudden change to another outlet. Tell me all about your new gig and what it's all about.
Sure. So it's called PHLY. We have just launched the Philadelphia market about 3 weeks ago, I guess, right after week one. Zach Berman, with whom I know you are intimately familiar. He and I do an Eagles show 5 times a week. You know, we did the Birds with Friends podcast under the Athletic umbrella, and now we are out from under that. We have live shows 5 days a week on all 4 of the major Philly sports teams. So you've got a great crew covering the Sixers, Flyers, and Phillies. And we've got, pregame, postgame shows. And then there's also, a little bit of writing on allphly.com. So Zach and I, apparently are like wedded to each other. We are like umbilical cord is connected at a new place.
Well, you're really good, especially on video. You're a very good duo. He's kind of the straight man, and he's so well suited for that role. I mean, there's
no acting there.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you do a very good job of confounding and harassing him. It works really well.
Well, I appreciate you saying so. It is my life's work to make Zach uncomfortable.
Exactly. Yes. So you come from sports writing royalty. Your dad and your mom were very involved in the business. That would scare me to death, frankly, if I were starting out. My parents didn't have anything to do with anything like this. How did you approach that? Is that what you always wanted to do? Or, what happened? How'd you get into this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So my parents met when they were working together at Sports Illustrated in the early 80s. So that's like the genesis. And I think it's not that I looked at it and it was like, this is what I want to do. It was more that dinner table conversation was about sports. We were like a huge sports family, all 4 of us kids playing a bunch of sports. We're actually all now work in sports in some different capacity.
Wow.
But it's like there's a crazy amount of privilege in that. Like,
yeah,
just from the beginning of seeing that like a job in sports was possible for both of them, and then the ability to like take a job with the Eagles that was paying $8 an hour, $9 an hour, something like that. Like that is not something that is an opportunity for everybody. So
right,
it's important to acknowledge that. But I think part of it is a little bit daunting, but also it felt a little bit like second nature.
Okay. What does your dad think of what you do? You mentioned there's a little bit of writing involved in your latest venture. I guess the business has changed so much. I often think about, what would I do if I were just starting out now? And I would be lost. I mean, I would have a terrible time with this. I got in this because I wanted to write for a living. And that's sort of like a little bit about what the sports journalism world is about now, but not very much, frankly. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's hard because I don't know. Are you like this, Les? Where like does writing take a lot out of you? Do you bleed over every word?
Yes,
I do.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, and so like when I am writing like a big feature, and it's keeping me up in the middle of the night, and it's all I can think about, and it's like that becomes like the myopia that you're living in. That's like that is, and it's tough. And I mean, this is all relative. Like it's not an actual tough job, but to not have to go through that ringer, I think we can all see like the appeal of that. That said, like, it's the cliche of, I hate writing, but I love having written. And so like that,
Right.
the pride when you feel like you have written a good story, I think is probably hard to match. Like just the craft of it, right? You feel like
Mhm.
you have done something a little bit more impressive. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not the one in control of like the way that media is going, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely. I
I'm
know.
happy to
Yeah.
play whatever role I can.
And it's important to be adaptable like that. Certainly, you have to be. It's great that you are. Yeah, with the writing thing, I always secretly craved opportunities to write on a tight deadline, like night games,
So you had
simply
no
because I
excuse.
had to let go of the story.
Exactly.
And it was like, okay, I couldn't make it any better. They wouldn't let me make it any better. This is as good, and it
100%.
was freeing,
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's time has run out. This is part of like the I'll give Zach a nod, like the Gladwellian 10,000 hours thing. Throughout school, like I was always a procrastinator, and I feel like
Yeah, me
most
too.
writers, aside from Zach, are born and bred procrastinators, right? Like I would. It was like a game I was playing with myself. Like, what's the latest I can wait until I start writing this essay?
Right.
And who knew that was just preparing myself to be on deadline.
Yeah, me too. Exactly. I was walking through a student union at a college recently and remembering my student union and sitting. This random memory came back of writing an essay. I sat in there with a giant bag of chocolate covered raisins for like 5 hours writing this essay and turned it in. But yeah. It was not a long process, but we're getting kind of far afield here, I guess.
That's
So
okay.
for the benefit of our viewers and listeners, if there are any still around, let's talk about the Eagles a bit. One thing I'm really interested in, so the nickel business with Avonte Maddox out, presumably for the season, they kind of mixed things up. They had James Bradberry in there some, but they also used Sidney Brown. Sidney's injured. He didn't practice today. Another safety, Justin Evans, is also injured. It's not clear what his situation is. Can they mix it up this week, or is it just going to have to be James Bradberry? And if it is James Bradberry, how do we feel about Josh Jobe as a full-time outside corner?
It's a good question, and they have so many moving parts right now. And like Mario Goodrich makes the 53-man roster essentially because he's the backup nickel, right? That's the idea. And Avonte Maddox gets injured week 2. Goodrich gets a shot, and what they think of how well he did because he was inactive the next game when they had no other nickel options, right?
And I agree with them, by the way. He looked like
yes and no, because I didn't think that he personally didn't think that he should have made the roster to begin with, because I thought that maybe some safety depth who would help in special teams and Kayvon Wallace would have made a little bit more sense there. Or Mekhi Garner, if you're going to keep a 7th corner because he's got a little bit more long time upside. They played it right if they want, because they keep 2 of those 3 guys. But if you think that he was worthy of the shot, I sort of felt like he deserved a full week of preparing to be involved in the game plan.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Right. All of that said, because there's no Sidney Brown, presumably, I mean, if this is a rookie and he hasn't practiced on a Thursday, do they think that he's, well-versed enough to get 1 day of limited practice and then play? My guess is probably not. Then again, they've also got Evans out, so you need some safeties, right? It seemed like in that last game, they were willing to lean a little bit even more into that big nickel package with Sidney Brown in the slot until he got hurt, right? I think there were a few more snaps of that than there were of Bradberry inside until Sidney Brown went down. So my guess is, I think they're going to be heavy on Bradberry and the nickel this week and Josh Jobe on the outside. I think Jobe has done okay. I think he's done fine.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that, he's the next James Bradberry, but I think he's holding his own. And I think he is the next best player that they have available.
And I want to see more, before I make any long-term decisions on him. He's young. He hasn't played that much. I'm willing to look a little bit, and see what they have there.
I think so too. And then in terms of like the other options that they have, I mean, I guess they're going to have to elevate a safety, Tristan McCollum from the practice squad, maybe to just be a backup in this game. But I think the guy that I would keep
for him. I know you're into this sort of thing, but they played against his brother the other night. He couldn't be up for that game.
Come on, let's get Mrs. McCollum in the stands with the split jersey.
Yeah. But identical twin brother. I mean, that would be so confusing. You'd see the guy out there, you think, wait a minute. That's
well, this is what my big deal was when the Browns came for joint practices this summer. You had Adam Berry and Andrew Berry, and I thought it was criminal that they didn't just try to do like a sister switch for a day and see if anybody noticed.
Absolutely, that would have been really funny. That's the kind of thing that I like. That you're into that sort of whimsical, nonsensical stuff, and I'm there for it. I really am.
Well, it's not it's not the world's most serious job. I think we can agree about that.
Yes. Absolutely.
I think the other guy to keep an eye on is Eli Ricks. He in the game where Avonte Maddox went down, there was one snap where Mary Goodrich was off the field for some reason, and Eli Ricks is the guy who took the rep inside. So I would imagine that means that he's the next guy up there. And I would be curious to see if there are times when they would rather have him inside than Bradberry. But my guess is we will probably see a lot of that sort of Bradberry nickel.
Okay. There's a lot of talk this week about the tush push or the brotherly shove or whatever the hell you call it. Mike Sealski has a really good column today, I think, sort of making fun of the people that are so upset about this. The whole controversy kind of took me by surprise.
I don't get it at all, to be honest.
What's that?
I don't get it at all.
Yeah, I don't either. It's a quarterback sneak, and there are guys behind him. But often the guys behind him don't have anything to do with the play. There's people claiming that players are going to get injured. How are they going to get injured? They're not even building up any speed. They're just pushing into each other as they do on every play, except in a more concentrated fashion. I can't imagine that anybody's going to get seriously injured doing this. So there's somebody that was it Chris Sims who's saying, well, I would try to take out the quarterback. How in the world would you do that?
Yeah, I mean,
I've already seen teams try to send a guy over the top just to stop the quarterback from going forward. But other than that, how do you even make contact with the quarterback on that play? How is anybody going to get hurt? Why is it a problem for anyone?
I don't understand I don't even understand the aesthetic argument. That this is like an ugly play. I mean,
how is it any uglier than any other running play?
Right. Or any other quarterback sneak. And you're right that I would venture that 65% of the Eagles quarterback sneaks, there is no pushing. It's just a regular quarterback sneak.
Or if the pushing arrives, it arrives way late after the first down.
The only reasonable argument I think against it is that the rule did used to be you are not allowed to push your own player, right? And so if you want to say that should be the rule again, I don't really have a strong argument or opinion about that. I think that would be fine. If we really wanted to regulate that out, that's fine. And guess what? I think the Eagles, because they still have a really good offensive line, and Jalen Hurts would still be very, very good at quarterback sneaks. It's all.
Yeah, I think that's the part that the critics don't get is that it isn't the people behind him doing it; it's him. But the thing that I have had some qualms about is not at all with that play, but downfield. When you see a guy catch a pass and he stood up, and all of a sudden there are people from both teams running in, and his offensive linemen are trying to push him forward, and the defense is trying to push him back, and these people are running at speed into each other, and the poor guy with the ball is, people are tugging at the ball, and to me, that is unnecessary and is going to get somebody hurt.
Yeah.
But at this line of scrimmage, I don't see any issue.
Well, I think it's the very classic NFL not seeing the forest for the trees situation where it's we got to really focus on this one play that happens. I don't know, 10 times across the league each weekend. Meanwhile, no one who is a fan of this multi-billion-dollar sport has any idea what a catch is. Something very fundamental to the game, it's open to interpretation. Let's be serious.
And it was so much simpler in the era before high definition replay to know what a catch was.
Sure.
Because it was you guy caught the ball or he didn't. Now it's like, oh, the ball might have moved.
It might have.
Like,
Did he have control when it moved?
Yeah. Oh, good God. It's just so. I think the league is over officiated and the replay is being. I think it should be used to correct egregious errors. I don't think we should be trying to get 27 different views of whether there might have been a blade of white grass under the left cleat. I
agree.
But that's the way football is now, and I guess we're kind of stuck with it. I don't think it's going to go back to the old way anytime soon. But we do have a commercial we have to do here, Bo, and then we'll be right back with you for the final segment of Bowen on the Birds for this week.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom-reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back for the final 15 minutes of Bowen on the Birds with Bo Wulf from PHLY, the new platform in sports in Philly that has a lot of interesting people working for it. And I think it'll be an enterprise to certainly keep an eye on going forward.
We hope so.
Yes. So Eagles Commanders. Commanders got blown out by the Bills last week, and I think that's causing some Eagles fans not to take them at all seriously. And then there's good reason for that in that they've given up more sacks than anybody else in the league. The Eagles, of course, have a voracious defensive line that's dominated their games thus far. But the Commanders before last week really, they won their first two games. They weren't bad. Sam Howell wasn't bad. They certainly have a good defensive line, almost on par with the Eagles in some senses. Not against the run, but certainly in terms of pass rush potential. How do you see this matchup, Bo?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it and I find it hard to see the path to a victory for the Commanders, but then I also acknowledge that division games are weird and, you never know. It's any given Sunday, as they say in the NFL, but, where the Commanders are so strong are places where the Eagles are well suited to handle it, right? Like, and where the Eagles are weak, the Commanders are not really in position to take advantage of, it seems like, right? Is Sam Howell going to pick them apart in the middle of the field? I doubt it.
Right.
And will the Eagles offensive line be able to to handle that Washington front? I think they will. I think maybe they will not have as much success on the ground against this Commanders defense as they have had the last 2 weeks, but I'm still betting on, the Eagles offensive line pretty much against anybody. And I think that it probably means that this week will have to be a little bit more through the air. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the Commanders have, a good enough secondary necessarily to handle A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. And so if Jalen Hurts is a little bit better than he was last week or, about the same, then I aside from wonky turnover luck, I do find it hard to see the path to a Commanders upset.
Well, that's exactly what happened a year ago, or not quite a year ago. I guess it was November when the Commanders came in. The Eagles were 8-0, and wonky turnover luck was a story of that game. Mm. Dallas Goedert fumbling while getting his face mask twisted. Quez Watkins fumbling after catching a 50-yard pass.
Right.
That there was all kinds of strange going on that kept the Eagles from extending their unbeaten streak that day. But, realistically, I don't see that happening again like that. And I think you're probably right. A little bit of normalcy with a 1 p.m. start time. I don't know what
Seriously.
You guys are going to do with that. That's rare these days for the Eagles.
I think they've got 2 on the schedule. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think everybody thinks this ought to work out, but you never know. It's one thing I do worry about with the Eagles still, and I still haven't seen it, blitz pickup.
Mm.
Often not a function of the offensive line. It still looks pretty whiffy to me, and I just wonder what's going on there and why that hasn't been better. In fact, if you look at the pass blocking grades, like on Pro Football Focus, the Eagles haven't given up a lot of sacks, but they're not really, there's some. I don't know if the offensive line hasn't played together as a unit enough or what, but it's not quite. People talk about Jalen Hurts being not quite what they were hoping. I don't think the O-line in pass protect has really been the setup, the whole setup, not just the O-line, but the tight ends and the running backs. I don't think that whole protection thing has gone as well as I hoped it would.
Yeah, I think they have not been as good as they have been in the run game. For all of his explosiveness, DeAndre Swift is not a great blitz protector. Yeah. It certainly seems like through 3 games. He was better, I thought, in week 3 than he was in week 2. But I think Jalen Hurts probably knows that, and that's part of why he may be eager to escape now and then. I like Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson have both probably been just a tick below their normal standard in pass protection. It feels like. I think the interior has been okay, and I think they have handled stunts and stuff well. It's just that more like individual matchups, they push back a little bit more than you may have expected. But I would say that's. I mean, I guess it's a little bit of a concern against this particular front. Those guys are going to have their wins. Even Jason Kelce gets beat by Greg Gaines in that last game for
I remember that. Yes.
So it's I think that'll be a factor in the game, and if you're designing the path to victory for the Commanders, that's probably how it comes, right? Is maybe a couple big hits and big turnovers forced by that defensive line. But on the other side of the ball, I mean, it's after Sam Howell gets sacked 9 times last week, all of a sudden he's got an even better pass rush coming at him this week. Unless this is a sort of slog it out, low scoring game. Again, I feel pretty good about the Eagles' chances.
Right. Well, I think Washington might have the better punter in Tressway, but we don't really know about the new guy yet. He only got to punt once last week. So,
a better special teamer, former Eagle Jeremy Reeves.
Yes, Jeremy Reeves, and of course Casey Toohill, who scored a touchdown last year on that final play that upset. Toohill, that was a bizarre. I don't know how you lose one of your draft picks that way.
I've been complaining about it for years. The whole order of operations made no sense.
It did not.
He's a 7th round pick. If they by keeping him on the active roster, they signaled to the league that he was worth being on a roster. If they had thought that they were going to give this guy's roster spot up for Vinny Curry when he got healthy, they should have not put him on the roster, and nobody would have claimed him. He would have just been on the practice squad.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. And he's still in the league and still with Washington. And, he's not a star. He's a backup. But it's grating to lose. There've been a number of those over the years. Usually they do a pretty good job of figuring out who they need to keep. But, we all remember Jordan Poyer. With Chip Kelly, and once in a while there's something like that. Raheem Mostert is a guy. He's been hurt a lot, but that was another guy that he had a really good training camp that year.
Chandon Sullivan is all these guys. Yeah.
Oh, that's a very good one because he was here for a while. It wasn't just for training camp. He was on the team, and he's had a good career. You can't win them all, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's like I'm complaining about Casey Toohill and Kerry Vincent. Meanwhile, like Howie Roseman's going out and getting AJ Brown. So we know how the scales weigh there.
Yeah, and the draft has worked so well for them the last few years. Things have fallen in their lap the last few years so perfectly. It's amazing. It wasn't very long ago when Carson Wentz left. We also thought that the Eagles had this really old defense that was going to just fall apart. And that is so much not the case. It's just because of what they've been able to do in the draft, primarily. It's Josh Sweat, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis. They've really been lucky and good in this respect, I guess.
Yeah, I think 2 things there. I think they have been lucky to some degree on the age front, where guys like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and Darius Slay and Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson have all stayed healthy and played at that level. which, every single one of those guys doing that, aside from, Brandon Graham tearing his Achilles and missing a whole year, is pretty statistically unlikely.
Yes,
You just look across the league. Like I continue to be incredibly impressed with Darius Slay, because I thought that he was a declining player when they traded for him, and he had that first year where he was not so great, and then he's been awesome since. And then the other thing is, like, when after 2000, when they cleared house, there was this like just huge gap on the roster where it was all guys on their rookie contracts and then the old guys, right? They did not have anybody in the prime of their career.
Yeah.
And what then happened was this is not luck. These are the guys they drafted, but that 2018 draft class, that 5-player draft class, those guys graduated. It turned out that 4 of them were like key tent poles on the team in Dallas Goedert, Avonte Maddox, Josh Sweat, and Jordan Mailata. And
without having a first-round pick that year.
Right. And so I feel like that is one thing that is maybe, I don't know if it's under discussed, but like in terms of the general health of the roster, that was a huge part of it.
Yes, absolutely. And then having these high picks the last few years, it's easy. I mean, to some degree, Jalen Carter falls in your lap, but it also doesn't happen if you're picking 30th. I mean,
right.
You just don't have any opportunity to do something like that. So, yeah, I think drafting high these last few years has really dramatically rebuilt their future, it seems to me. Do you have a concern about this team after 3 games? Do you have something that you're really uneasy about?
I mean, I'm a little bit uneasy about the way that Jalen Hurts is playing. What I've been saying is that it's interesting because it feels like everything, the pieces would make a lot more sense of like the evolution of the offense if it was the 2021 offense and then this offense and then last year's offense, where like they skipped a step where they went from that like super run heavy offense to all of a sudden they were one of the best, most efficient passing teams in the league, and Jalen Hurts looks like a superstar. All of that, like, quarterback development is not linear, but like it feels like this player is the guy who we would maybe expected to see last year, and then last year's player would have been the next version of that.
That's well said. Yes,
which is like all of which is to say that I expect that Jalen Hurts is going to play better over the course of this season. But coming off of like playing the best game of his life on the biggest stage, it seems like he's like a little bit jittery in the pocket right now. And maybe that's just a little bit of rust and shaking it off. And obviously it's great that they are able to still be 3-0 and like, dominating teams up front, and they don't have to really worry about that. The schedule sets up nicely that way, for them, where if he's going to be peaking in the second half of the season, well, those are the games where they're going to need him to be a little bit better. So I wouldn't say that it's like a huge concern, but it's a little bit on my radar that it doesn't seem like he's quite playing at that same level.
He just doesn't seem as comfortable as he seemed last year.
And I know that that's like a little bit objective or subjective rather, and that like his numbers aren't terrible, but they are a little bit below what they were last year, especially in the advanced metrics and stuff. And so, I just, my eye test tells me that he doesn't look quite the same and have quite the same command of the offense. But then again, it's in theory, you've got a new offensive coordinator.
Yes.
He spent so much time last summer talking about this is the first time he's got 2 years in a row since high school with the same play caller. So maybe this was to be expected a little bit. But other than that, I mean, it's just like, let's see how much of the injury bug they keep getting, because we knew that was going to be something.
That's the thing that I, in the offseason, I was sure that was going to be the thing that would get them. And it's still, obviously we've got a long way to go, but it hasn't yet. But that's what happens to teams, who don't get back, they get hurt.
Right. And it's who does it happen to? It's going to happen. Like, which places are we going to lose?
Right.
And so like, it's actually worked out pretty well for them, and they're getting injured guys, but it has been like the right guys to get injured for the most part.
It hasn't been a catastrophic, oh my God, what are they going to do kind of thing.
Right. And so you're just sort of, crossing your fingers and holding your breath on that front.
Absolutely. Well, Bo, we're out of time here on Bowen on the Birds. I really appreciate you coming on and lending us your expertise. We certainly needed some. Thanks again, and good luck with your new job, and I hope I hope we can talk again at some point this season.
I would like that very much. Thank you for having me.
Take care. And to everybody out there, that's it for another week for Bowen on the Birds.